Hey Ben, 1 second. Just got something in my eye. Okay.
How are you doing?
Hello, sir.
How's it going?
Good, thank God. A little birdie told me, well, not a little birdie. I overheard you. I think it was like in your Tanya talk. I don't know where you picked up some new books, and one of them was a Pirkei Avot book.
Yeah, I got it right here.
I'm excited. I'm excited for the commentary.
I'll check it out. I was planning to. Looks like it's a various different commentaries, and this is published by Chabad, so there's going to be some Hasidic commentaries as well.
Nice.
But it looks like they have a bunch. Rashi, Maral, Rambam.
Great.
Yep.
Okay, awesome. Are you going to use it this week, like this class?
I thought that I'll just I had a chance to look at it a little bit. I thought I'll just look at it, and if there's something that we're not mentioning that we didn't mention, and I think we would both enjoy, I might bring it up. But
I'll be glad. I'm always into learning things. And what were you doing? Not what were you doing buying books, because that's quite obvious, but what was going on? Like you just happened to walk by like a book fair, or?
No, I think just Chabad had the 10th of Shvat, maybe. No, not 10th of Shvat, 10th of Tevet.
Right.
They had just a book sale, and
underground in the tunnels.
Through the ground, yeah. It was it took a while to get here, but so I don't know how advanced the tunnels are, but it got here, and it's great. Yeah, this one, and I started the Torah studies by Rabbi Sachs. It was pretty funny because I was reading it with my wife, and I told her usually I print something from like Chabad. They have like their weekly parasha. So we kind of I print some of those and we talk about it during Shabbat. And I told her this one, I don't know if we can do it. Like this one is a little bit more intense, like the Torah study, even though it's Rabbi Sachs bringing it down from the Rebbe.
Yeah.
A little bit more kind of like stuff. And it was so, but it was interesting.
If you don't mind me asking, so what does that look like? Like you say, I go over that stuff. You go over that with your wife on like Friday night or Shabbat day. And are there guests at the table? Is it just you and her?
It's just sometimes there might be guests. Usually when there's guests, we might not necessarily go through those, even though for particular guests we might talk a little more explicit Torah, but we're not. Most of our friends are not. Even though we have a lot of friends that are Jewish, but they're not as
secular. So what is
secular? But yeah,
how do they friends / work take or processing your transition?
And it depends. It's not necessarily as explicit in all cases. So I act differently depending on who am I interacting with.
Sometimes you're snorting cocaine. Sometimes you're not.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So you act as as
well.
Yeah. But so no, not to that extreme, but still, yeah. I try to pace myself for myself and for others, yeah. I think that's the main thing.
Do you see yourself over the last, I don't know, X time that you've been in your journey? Do you find yourself sort of seeing things through? For example, if it doesn't matter if I'm talking to Paul Vanderklay, or if I'm talking to Jacob, or I'm talking to anyone. If there's something that reminds me of, let's say, a Bible verse or like a thing, that's sort of where my head goes to, and I mention that. My question is, do you feel like that's something that you find yourself going to, or like you make sure not to like expose yourself in that way, I guess?
Yeah, so it's definitely a way where I try to pace myself. So sometimes it definitely it occurs to me where I think about those things.
Mm-hmm.
So I have to so yeah, so sometimes I would mention something, sometimes I would not, sometimes I would mention one out of three things that come to mind during the conversation. So I have to make sure
Right.
that I don't always, but it's also yeah, so
I
yeah.
hear you. So like on your TED talk, you keep on telling yourself like, don't speak about the 10 sphera. Don't speak.
Yeah, try to
Uh,
keep it balanced.
okay. And besides that, week has been going well.
Yeah, yeah, week has been going well. I had
And
some
relaxing Shabbat.
relaxing Shabbat. Yeah, Shabbat was good. We hosted
That's
a
awesome, man.
friend, so that was nice.
What does that look like by you guys hosting? Is it like they 2 hour meal and then like Shabbat Shalom, or is it like they're there all Saturday?
This one specifically was more. Yeah, this was Friday night. So,
Gotcha.
but we had a meal, and the person stayed with us. Like we just had more, kind of fun. We're also kind of like in a new place, so we have newer friends mostly.
That's nice.
So it's interesting. It's also kind of like an interesting thing of figuring out, yeah, who do you gel more with? So who gets to spend more time? Like, what do you have to talk with people? Like, so that's kind of like part of the things that we're doing now, kind of like discovering community and how to interact.
So exciting. It's just making me think about like what my move coming up soon, and I'm excited.
Wait, you're moving, right?
My brother and I. Well, it was going to be my brother, my sister, and I, but it ended up just being my brother and I. We bought 2 houses. Each bought a house in this new development, Yeshuv, called Gvalat Eden in Eden Hills, and it's in the Ella Valley, where David fought Goliath. So still close to Jerusalem, and like near Tel Aviv, or like in the middle. So yeah, it's moving from a city into like moving from an apartment into like a house is obviously a big change. I'm doubling up like the size, so that's like exciting. Gardens, we're surrounded, like we're in the middle of like all these like forests, and there's like a lot of wineries around us. So
is it Givat Ela?
It's an Emek Hayela. It's called Gvalat Eden.
Right.
And the idea was that it was going to be a mixed community. You've been to synagogue already, and I'm sure in synagogue you find like little notes, pamphlets of like teachings and like like they give out. So many times there's commercials on these things, right? Come buy a house here, right? So secular people don't have that. Right? They don't have so very quickly it gets gobbled up by religious people because they sit on the Shabbat table and they discuss, where are we moving? Where are you moving? Let's move together. And they move as a pack. Even more so the ultra Orthodox, which could really just, based on a rabbi's decision, 500 families could buy in like 1 week. And like, it's a tremendous amount of like purchase power. Either way, it's not going to be like 50-50. It is going to be a mix of, let's say, yeshivish and modern Orthodox and nationally religious. Now, there are some, this term called the Tatlash, which is someone that used to be observant. They're sort of in their own category because people like that generally, so the people that are moving to the neighborhood, let's say the 10% or 15% that's moving to the neighborhood, that's they're looking to, like, I want my son to have like a religious education. However, I want to be driving on Shabbat, and I want to have my grandmother over because she's Orthodox, but I want to be able to do my thing. So it's that sort of balance. I'm excited about that though, because I want to see what their kids and my kids, and if they interact, what that looks like and what that next generation looks like.
Yeah.
So
Cool.
hopefully
It's
it'll be.
nice also that you're doing it with your brother.
Yeah, I mean, I know people are like, "Oh, I hope you like him. Oh, I hope you guys are friends." Like, so yes, that obviously is very important. Yeah, it's fun to go with family. It's also very nice that like we're gonna turn into like the family hub in a certain sense. So like all the other siblings are sort of gonna come to us. Um, yeah, it's nice. I'm excited, but I'm also excited for the interactions, going to the synagogue, the drama, comments. It's gonna be good. All right, so let's see at the stage. This was number. Okay, this one we did right. We were talking about the smells, the process inside, the flies we see, and we're talking about how this is really talking about the inner corruption or the inner spirituality that one needs to take into consideration when going to the temple, and like the process of like where you want to put your mindset, how you want to orient yourself properly. We were talking about how the fire didn't the fire wasn't extinguished, and the tensions between fire meaning emotions and logic sort of being like the rain or the cooling element for that, and trying to find that balance where generally speaking you would have like rain washes out all the fire. Here we want our logic to direct the fire, not necessarily extinguish the fire. Then we also saw it in the smoke, that the pillar of smoke itself wasn't pushed aside, rather in this period of transition, smoke representing something that we're transitioning in, that goes directly up to the sky, and that could, you're in Jerusalem, you'll be able to maintain your proper orientation. We gave like where your cursor is right now about the snake and the scorpion. We talked about how the heel is like the how we're still connected to the earth, and generally speaking, that's something that we're always thinking about, right? Like I might want to be more spiritual, but what about my taxes? What about my this? What about all the earthly things that are connected to my heel? So we see at the temple, the heel wasn't trouble. You weren't nervous about getting hit by the scorpion, aka the taxman, or getting bit by a snake, aka world troubles. Rather, you were open and free to think and be in this divine spiritual state. And we ended up at the place not finding a place to sleep. Here too, both like physically, because everyone was in Jerusalem, like miraculously there's room for everyone, and also the fact that no one felt like they didn't have room. We also spoke about the people bowing down and standing up. When they were standing up, the brain is on top of your heart. When you bow down, your heart is on top of your brain. And even in that space where theory, you'd be nervous to share your emotions, nevertheless, that place was a very safe space and no one felt threatened. I think that's like al regel achat, as they say. Yeah. So we just did. Then we spoke about this twilight time. We spoke about this transition period. We spoke a little also about like how we brought in Job a little, how he was dealing with the transition tension that his kids were dealing with.
Right.
We mentioned how the Talmud sort of answers that, saying during transition periods, ultimately we say we proclaim the Shema, right? When we're not sure what day it is, what time it is, when there's a sense maybe darkness is coming, we make sure to remind ourselves who we believe in. And of course, we spoke about other things over here about why these things were important. The shamir, the special magical worm that would manage to carve into stone, and that was showing how our intentionality. We spoke about the burial of Moses, the tree of Abraham. We even spoke about the demons as well, or the shadim, the bad spirits that come, that take over. So that's what we were talking about last time. And also last week, I threw a little teaser about a story about a demon, the king of the demons.
Right, Ashmedai.
Exactly. Yeah. And Ashmedai. So, and we stopped at 7, right?
Yep.
It's said there. Here we go. Why is it? Sorry, 1 second. I have a fancy house. I don't know if that's a fancy house. I take that back. I have a house that has AC, and I have a house that has underfloor heating. Nevertheless, I have this little blow heater next to me, since I'm a child. There's just like the sound, the white noise of like the heater, things like that. Like I'm like, I love it.
Yeah.
But it was actually also when I was in yeshiva, I had one as well. Like I just like when it's very cold, like I love being warm.
Mm-hmm.
Just give me an issue. So you see me bending over here. It's just
you need to have optimal experience, like
optimal heat. Exactly. I can't be too hot, can't be too cold. Okay. Shiva Dvari. Wait, can you scroll down for a second? Is that the right one? Yeah, just the little the watermark on top is just there. We go. Got it.
Oh, okay.
שבעה דברים בגולם ושבעה בחכם. חכם אינו מדבר לפני מי שגדול ממנו, בחוכמה ובמניין, ואינו נכנס לתוך דברי חברו, ואינו נבהל להשיב. שואל כעניין ומשיב כהלכה. ואומר על ראשון ראשון ועל אחרון אחרון. ועל מה שלא שמע, אומר, לא שמעתי. ומודה על האמת וחילופיהן בגולם. Okay, let's just read this in English. There are 7 things that characterize a boor, and 7 characterize a wise man. A wise man does not speak before one who is greater than him in wisdom and in age. He does not interpret his fellow's words. He does not hasten to answer. His questions are on subject and his answers to the point. He responds to first things first and to latter things latter. Concerning what he did not hear, he says, I did not hear. He concedes to the truth. With the boor, the reverse of all these things is the case. It's also interesting over here that this person, this is like the first iterations of ChatGPT, just ending it with like the reverse in this case, basically, because the last few, they kept on giving us all the options, right? So it's a little cut and paste going on over here. Okay, so first off, you notice that we moved from 10 to 7.
Yeah.
Right, so this is our first transition. I believe later on we move on to 4, and maybe down to 3, but we moved on to 4. So if 10, we were dealing with sort of creation in a certain sense. 7 is dealing more with like reality once things are created on the ground. Right, this is connecting more to like the 7 days of rest. Like now we're in it. Right, we're in this realm right now, and we're dealing with the things that actually do with this realm. If earlier we were talking about this twilight time where the things that were created in the beginning. So now we're getting closer to us ourselves.
Yeah.
Okay. So the golem or the boor, right? It's not necessarily wise versus like unwise. Like we're not talking about someone over here that's brilliant and someone over here that's not brilliant. Rather, we're talking about over here that's someone that is in a solid position of being categorized as wise, and we'll see what those are, and someone that is and here the English translation over here is boor, but the word golem is more appropriate because it's sort of like a unfinished material that you're playing with.
Right. Or it's unrefined. Like it's chomer gelem is like
exactly unrefined material. Chomer gelem, right? So it's just like I'm playing with this putty right now.
Yeah.
So again, we should recognize that we're not necessarily talking about something that's like the opposite over here. And there's one, and we're going to introduce these 7 things of a fully developed wise man. And then, it's the opposite the contrast is with the golem, with someone that is not fully refined yet. That was a good word, refined.
I got this from the book.
Oh, you got it from the book. Okay.
I won't mention all the.
No. Please do. No. Definitely. It only enriches the conversation. Okay. So we have now. What are they? Chacham eino medaber bifnei mi shegadal mimeno bechokma ubeminyan. By the way, did I put a link? If anyone wanted to join, yes, I did a link. If someone wants to join, just wanted to make sure. Okay. Bifnei mi shegadol mimeno bechokma ubeminyan. So here it's we should just expand a little that, and this is really these are good lessons for all of us to take because this is very relevant for us day-to-day life. So we're in meetings all the time and we talk to people all the time, some more impressive, some less impressive, business deals, pitch deals. Ultimately, you have to, and it doesn't necessarily mean someone that is like, if I'm 37 and he's 40, so like now he trumps me. necessarily. It's more about someone with more life experience, more greater wisdom. We should recognize that and understand that wisdom and that greater life experience, right, gives them in a certain sense the first dibs, right, to sort of lay out their case, because it would make sense for me to listen to someone that has more experience than me, right, or has more wisdom than me. And it's about the ability also of the wise man, or let's say the lesser wise man, us in this case, to identify the status of others, right? So that it's more than just saying, like, it's very easy for you to tell me, listen, Elon Musk is walking in, right? So like, we're going to let him speak first. And I'll be like, okay, I thought I would speak first. It's more about, I walk in and I hear this guy, Elon Musk, speaking. I don't know who it is, but very quickly I realize, like, okay, this guy is different than me. And because he's different than me, I identify his wisdom. Now you could be like, I don't know his life experience, but the idea is to be in tune. The wise man knows to look around and can discern between someone that has nothing to say and someone that has much to say. And once he does that, which is level one, once is to recognize the man that is greater than him, he then also waits his turn.
Yeah, so it's interesting. It's interesting. This came up. I don't know why I was thinking about this, but I was thinking about this. Challenge is sometimes is kind of like is given of like let's say. Well, what you're saying right now, if like Elon goes into a room and you're saying you're recognizing him in a certain way, what you're doing is you're employing a certain bias because you presume this person has certain knowledge about different things in life.
Or I'm using my wisdom, like you could say you presume. I would argue that the wise man here that they're talking about is someone that has enough skill, enough wisdom to discern.
Yeah, I mean, I think what I'm trying to say, it's the same, because it's the being wise is understanding what's relevant. I'm using bias in terms in the good way of like being able to discern.
Gotcha.
When is it appropriate to care about something more than others? So you might have more patience to kind of hear Elon out as opposed to maybe somebody else that you're not sure how much knowledge they have about a certain subject. I was just thinking about this. I don't know how it got into my mind, but thinking of like, sometimes people say there's this thing where maybe like they give you like a piece of, they submit a piece of writing to a journal or something, and they use an anonymous name, but the writing itself is like Hemingway,
right,
or whatever. And then they send out another piece of writing, and the piece of writing that is written by somebody very mediocre, but the name of the submitter is somebody that's like very well known. And in some cases, like the very well known name with the mediocre content might do better than the other one, right? And I think maybe that's not the best example, but something like that, we can see that there's actually I can actually advocate or play the devil's advocate for saying, like, for the more well-known name, you might be, again, more patient, or we would employ a different bias based on your understanding that they might know more than you in what they're doing, at least for an initial, maybe not for like the whole process. Maybe you give them like just an extra measure of patience. And I think that ties into this, where you do give a little bit more to certain people because you presume they might be more valuable in certain areas. Obviously, you need to employ more and more discernment as time goes by, as they continue speaking or something. But then, yeah.
As we met, like, this is all being said also in the context or in the background of, remember what we said earlier about Al tistakel bakankan ela masha betocho, right? So we're saying already, you already have the skills to recognize that, like, don't judge a book by its cover. As in, so like, even if it sounds fantastic, you could still have some sort of judgment. First of all, as you noticed over here, no one said over here he wasn't judging. He just says he wasn't speaking, right?
Right.
So like, you could be saying over here, like, I'm listening and I'm wise enough to know that this guy seems legit and I'm going to listen. Midway, I could be like, the guy's an asshole. right?
Right. That's why I was trying to be careful saying it's like you maybe give an extra measure of patience to let
Yes, and now I understand what you're saying. Correct. So being wise like that, it allows you to afford the other a little more wiggle room, basically.
Yeah.
I'm just give me 1 second. I got to get out of this turtleneck. I'm sorry. It's boiling hot, right?
Optimal temperature. That's also another thing that the wise man does. He maintains optimal temperature. That's for sure. Okay, let me see if I can find something else here.
All right. Sorry.
All good.
So much better. Okay. So so we said it allows you to have that another moment of taking it in and making sure you are discerning correctly.
Right.
Right. So now, next stage, right? As I'm not, what was the translation in English? He does not interrupt his fellows' words, right? So first off, already his characters like you're already in the midst of the conversation and we're characterizing him as his fellow, right? So it's not like someone that you have nothing to hear from. Clearly there's something to discuss. But now I walked inside, I heard Elon speaking. I decided that, like, in theory, I have what to say, right? Yeah, he's wise. Yeah, he's more experienced. However, I have something to say. Now I'm going to wait. Why am I going to wait? Because I understand the difference between, let's say, the most important parts of the argument or the conversation that we're talking about, and let's say the conclusion of what he's talking about as well. So I have to also discern when I want to interrupt, right? I could come and I have this problem. Like, I'll hear someone say something and I'm like, it's fresh. I want to respond, right? The real wise man knows, like, is this even really the crux? Because I could respond to this point and this point. But if I waited a little longer and I heard the main point and I responded to it, that could cover all my bases regardless. It could be that I didn't even really need to say that part. Maybe I was just saying that part for ego reasons, right? So it is allowing me to recognize also, even if I have something to say, when is the appropriate time to say it? It could be that, like, yes, I'm just going to wait for him to wrap up. And some of that is also just listening to the cadence, right?
Yeah.
Like, he said, huh? That's the question, right? Like, where is the conversation going? Or if I'm the golem, or let's say we're using this as the eager person, he doesn't have that subtlety, right? He's just going to jump in and be like, well, I heard this and I heard that. And we see this obviously like in our live streams. It's fine because we're not, obviously that's not the standard we're trying to necessarily. Yeah, I mean, that isn't true. Sometimes we are trying to have that kind of standard. Jacob could be sometimes harsh with people. He's like, this question is silly, right? And he just takes them off. But that's sort of a response to saying, like, you interrupted, you didn't recognize what you were saying. So those are things that need to be, like, taken into consideration.
Yeah.
Okay. And the next. Sorry, go ahead.
Add something. But yeah, I think to follow up also on what you said in terms of hearing what the other person is saying, and I kind of holding in your head the entire argument, and also recognizing like the right thread to pull. It also helps you connect the rest of the conversation and lead it towards a fruitful place. I feel like when you're an outsider and when you're observing a conversation, right? A lot of time when I listen to conversation, I'm like, I wish she didn't comment on that, and then they went on this tangent. I wish they kind of
Right. Yeah,
followed
for
on
sure.
the main thing, right? The main purpose of what they're really, because sometimes you feel, you might feel a need as a person engaged in a conversation to kind of like make sure that you give your opinion on each small thing. I just wanted to mention this one small thing about something you
Right, but
said.
that's ego.
Yeah,
So,
I guess.
because in some cases, like there's, and I'm sure you could recognize this. You and I are talking. I said something that you want to respond to, but you don't want to say it yet. But now you're just thinking about, like, in a certain way, you're like, I hope we don't go too far, so I could still come back and say that comment that I wanted to say. And then it's not necessarily because it's generative for the conversation, rather because, like, you want to know that you got in that tidbit of information. And at some point, it's like, is it going to enrich the conversation, or do you just want to say, like, that you also knew the Beatles? So you're like, and that song, you're like, okay, yes, that's also a Beatles song.
It's also about the purpose of the conversation. It's like making sure that you are attuned and aligned towards the purpose of the conversation. I mean, I think here's a different example. Let's see if this works. This is not a conversation between two sages. This is a conversation that I had with a receptionist at a doctor's office. I came in for what turned out not to be an emergency, so that was good. But I came in and she said it would have been, we spoke a little bit. I told her I want to see the doctor. And then she said, it would have been great also. She said, I'll check with the doctor if she can see you. And next time, just make sure that maybe to call us before you get in so that we can figure out kind of like the right timing for you.
Yeah.
And the purpose of the conversation was I already achieved the purpose of a conversation. And also the purpose of the conversation, one of the purposes is to make sure that I'm friendly enough for her that she wants for my benefit, so that I'm not imposing too much on her. So I could have just said, sure, for sure, I'll do next time. I'll do it, or I'll take that into account. Thank you. But I said, I was just in the area. But yeah, sure, but for sure. But adding that small thing, and really it was kind of like an ego thing, like a small ego thing that I also recognized, because I wanted to. I understand what she's saying, but I wanted to tell her, like, but it was kind of like a personal thing that I had to say.
I totally get you saying, like, and you're going to see me also if I just come in from the area, because that also makes sense.
Yeah.
More than that, I also feel like there's a part of you says, like, why did you have to say that, Nancy? Like, I'm here now.
Yeah.
Like, are you like, oh, Nancy, do you think that I think I could do whatever I want when I want?
Yeah.
No. And like Nancy feels like she has to say it because, like, that's policy. But like, so that totally hits home. I have like a hard time with that. I had a conversation with like a bank teller today, so it was also like also something similar where like at some point I'm like, no, I'm going to teach her, and I'm like, why do I need to do that?
Right. So yeah, at the end of the day, the conversation that I had with the reception was good. I saw the doctor. We were both very friendly. I didn't impose too much, So obviously, I mean, I perceive myself as having, like, I had the right to impose at least a little bit, but I wanted, again, like I said, I wanted her to be on my side, as opposed to somebody that doesn't try to make a little adjustment for me. So it was interesting, kind of like making sure that I kind of understand how do I impose myself but being nice, but without having too much ego, and following up on the right things, and when to just say, sure, no problem.
After you left, she went to the doctor. She's like, he's still the type of guy that like then goes onto a live stream and like studies like ancient Hebrew texts about like what.
Yeah, how to talk to the receptionist.
Exactly, how to talk to the receptionist.
Yeah.
Okay, that's a good example. Okay, where were we? He does not hasten to answer, right? Or he does not hesitate to answer, or he does not get nervous from answering. So this is more about, in a certain sense, of someone that is developed and someone that is wise already, right? That we're not building up to someone wise. We're already dealing with the wise man. So he knows how to, again, discern between, let's say, a good question that someone's asking and criticism.
Yeah.
Right. So like there's a lot, and you could imagine the golem, or many of us, mid conversation or mid rant, we get hit with some questions.
Mm-hmm.
So some people completely unravel. You know, like their response can be like, "Don't you ask me questions," and they fight back.
Yeah.
Some of them just like go dead. Some of them get embarrassed. Some of them respond with nonsense. Some of them just repeat the same thing they said. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So a wise man, doesn't get nervous. Right. I came prepared. My things are in order. So I've already anticipated, and this is why the exercise of, let's say, a steel man is a good move, because like I'm aware of your questions. I'm aware of where you're going to take this.
Mm-hmm.
So A, I'm not nervous. B, I know how to answer a question which is just like an informative question, right? Which I might answer one way, to a criticism where, yes, I need to be quote unquote on the defense, but that doesn't mean I need to be scared not to answer or try to like, well, we'll get back to that later. Like, no, I know how to answer it head on, and I'm not nervous if I'm doing that as well. So again, it's multiple levels. What am I answering, right? Is this a question? Is this informative, or is this criticism? Two, regardless, I know how to respond to both of them.
Yeah.
It doesn't, I'm not saying you're not wise if like someone throws you off your track, but the idea is that the wise man has a Mishnah Dura, has like an organized concept of what he's thinking and what he's speaking about, and that allows him to not be nervous when he's responding.
Somebody just said this to me. So does this connect also to what did the Brisker Rav said? Like have a malach. I don't know how to say it in Yiddish.
I'm a halach.
Have a malach, yeah. Or
It's like you say a maimar. It's a ma'amar, but I got you. Okay.
Right, but like have a principled, intentional thinking process.
Yep.
Right. Yeah.
Tzvei dinim, two dinim, right? So that kind of, so my uncle, may he rest in peace, he was a big brisker. He was the prominent student, the Talmid Muvhak of Rav Aaron Soloveitchik, the Rav's brother. And so famously, there's a story when on Shabbos, like on Friday, he wouldn't let like the kids, like if his wife was cooking in the kitchen, you weren't allowed to eat any of the food that she's cooking. Because he's like, they have Shabbos particles. And his mind was like, I can't touch that, because that's like a whole different world. But that's someone that had a very much a system of how he looks at the world, how he thinks of the world. So if something happened, he was, my brother, my older brother, and my older cousin were playing. They were young. And I guess they were playing with like a hose or something. And on Shabbos, and he ran into the house and his pants were wet. And his dad picked him up and started yelling at him. But he yelled like, it's schita, it's Shabbos. Like it was very much like, it wasn't like my sons are playing. All he saw was like, this is like the code that's not working out. So either way, yes, there are people like that, and we should all work on having our own matrix and systems in place.
One thing that from the
book adds, the magical book, okay,
that Rabbi Moshe Al-Mushnino says.
Rabbi Moshe, one second. If there's new insights, I want to write them down. Moshe from Mushnino.
Al-Mushnino.
Al-Mushnino. Okay, yeah.
So he says that this can also refer to a teacher.
Which one? The Nivhal Ashiv?
No Nivhal Ashiv. So when you're a teacher, maybe like a student asks you a question, and the question is not the brightest question in the, it's an ignorant question. You don't dismiss it. You don't rush through your answer. Like, this is covered in like a gazillion books. Like, this is very basic. You don't do that. You don't nivhal from like hurrying, right? So you try to, even to the ignorant question, you try to answer it in a way that doesn't embarrass the student.
Okay. We're talking about a student.
So this referring to a teacher that receives a question from a student.
Well, I would argue that you could put all this whole Mishnah inside the context of teacher-student sort of situation going on over here. But you're saying specifically in this one, the teacher that doesn't rush to just wave away the student, rather he takes his time to answer it, even if it's, I mean, at that point, you got to ask yourself, like, you know, are the other kids in the class suffering because of this?
Right.
Okay. Next is Shoel Kenyan Umashiv Kahalacha. His questions are on the subject and his answers are to the point. Okay. So the wise man knows how to, you know, has laser focus. He knows how to stay focused on the central point, and he avoids getting sidetracked, right? You mentioned this, like about, I now mentioned, what about the Billy Joel concert? And next thing you know, we're talking about Billy Joel and Elton John in the 90s playing in China. Like, well, we were talking about this whole thing. How are we over here, right? So the wise man either knows how to keep you, you know, have like what those horses have on, right? Like to keep you walking straight. Or if he's a master, he'll answer your Billy Joel, but then bring you back, you know, like through it in a certain sense. But the idea is that he knows what the central point is. The golem obviously is all mishkabobbled in a salad, right? Like jumping back, going this, what about this? We already answered that point. You're still digging on that thing that's not relevant anymore. So Shoel Kenyan, right? So we're saying that like I'm on the subject matter, umashiv kalacha, and I'm answering you. In a relevant fashion, and this also could be seen as, okay, I'm the wise man and I have the information and I'm not being sidetracked. Okay. However, as I'm answering you, I start name dropping. I start just showing all like this stuff I have. That's ego coming into play right now. I'm answering in English. They said over here to the point. All right. So it's not that I'm supposed to be speedy, but like, did I need to mention the 7 other citations, or was that just, you know, what? Now you could be like, no, I needed to show that because I'm speaking in I'm speaking in a TED talk and people need to take me seriously. Sure. Great. But you have to think for a second when you're answering, and if it's even the right answer, how are you delivering that message? Is there ego wrapped around it, or am I trying to engage in the conversation itself, and I'm not thinking about how I'm being seen?
Yeah, and it's a lot also about, in addition to ego, sometimes it's also about understanding what is the right level of information. So when you're saying to the point,
that's
like
a great point.
If you're in a project, you're talking to a client, you're not going to talk about the intricacies. Depending on the client, you're not going to talk about the intricacies of how the chemicals of one color versus another might interact with the plumbing.
I'll stress that point even more. So like when I talk to clients, or when I'm looking at an email, or my partner sending an email, like we'll review, I'm like, don't use that term. Why? I'm like, because that is a scary term. It's the correct term, but she'll be like, what does that mean? And then I have to spend at least 5 lines explaining that. And it's not that I'm nervous of answering that, right? I'm lo nivhal lashiv. It's just I'm not at that point. I'm not shoel kanyan, and I'm not. They're asking a question. I'm not mashiv kalacha. I'm not responding properly because I'm muddying the water with more information. Right. So you have to, you could do this practice very easily on ChatGPT, right? You'll take a whole text and you'll give it to them, and you're like summarize until give it to me in 1 line. And you're like, oh wow, they could actually do that. And you're like, how did I move from 30 lines to 1 line, but the essence is still there?
Yeah.
Okay, and following that one is Vomer al Rishon Rishon, Ve'al Acharon Acharon. He responds to first things first and latter things later. So this is general. I know people. I don't think it's like it's not illegal for you to say like, let me first talk about this and then I'll get back to that. People do that. It's okay, but the idea is that again, you recognize the system you're talking about. You recognize how you're speaking and how to organize your thoughts. Yeah. Right. So the attitude is, yes, you could decide to start with the end and then go back to the beginning if it makes sense. And at that point, really the end was the beginning at that point, because like you just did it in that sense. But the idea is not to, and we hear this a lot, people speaking and then they start stumbling on their words. Oh, wait, I'll get back to that soon. Going back, that's someone that doesn't necessarily have his thoughts in order. And again, of course, that is going to be necessary. And as you could see, these are all intertwined.
Yeah.
Right. If I don't know how to do that, then I won't know how to answer it properly. If I don't know how to answer properly, I'm obviously going to be nervous to answer. If I'm nervous to answer, you're not someone to take me seriously because I'm not someone that knows how to answer properly. So all these things are interconnected and are all required for the wise man.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm thinking about this practically, and obviously you can do this with a lot of different mishnayot, but this is very practical, like to take it to every specific situation of like a discussion between people, whether it's you having a meeting, like whatever your role is, you have a meeting with multiple people, you can take each one of these small dictums and kind of analyze the conversation around that. Or I'm even thinking about like job interviews, these are things, this is something that's important. And also leavdil, improv. I don't know if anybody has done improv that is watching us too, but this is like in comedy, it's very important. Or even in a lecture, like Jordan Peterson also talks about it, about like connecting threads together, or calling back things. So obviously in comedy, that's
comedy, right? The
callbacks.
7 specials later, calling back to that first special.
Yeah. So these are very important things that you kind of like can analyze and improve how you're dealing with each of those contexts.
I mean, arguably you would say, right, like a good comedian, it's like an art form, right?
Right.
So like, the comedian is not nervous from the hecklers, right? He knows how to hit a punchline quickly. He knows when it makes sense to elaborate and expand, right? So these are, and he would be considered a very wise, Bill Burr is a very wise man in his field.
Right.
Jerry Seinfeld, one of the Gdolim.
Show name, yeah. Also.
Sure, exactly. I don't know where that puts like Joe Rogan right now. Is he like the off Bastin? Is he like the guy in charge? Is he? Okay. Ve'alma shelo shama omer lo shamati. I didn't like this, by the way. I mean, in Hebrew, it really means like I didn't understand. It didn't mean like it just didn't hear necessarily, like lo hivanti. But considering what he did not hear, he says, I didn't hear. Right? So that would seem obvious. But the attitude is, first of all, we live in a world today where no one knows how to say, I don't know. Right?
So you're saying it means I didn't understand. You're also taking it from like Naseh v'nishma, which is not, it's Naseh, it's we will hear, and then we will do, and then not we will hear, because it's we will understand. Like really,
we'll understand. Well, again, it's interesting. Correct, because like it doesn't help us to be like, oh, they said don't do this and that's it. Like we want to listen and internalize, right? So again, the wide person is, first of all, is knows how to distinguish between, let's say, new knowledge, right, or familiar stuff that he's already aware of, right? Yeah. So like, and ideally, someone that hears new knowledge for the first time is like, oh, this is awesome. Yeah. Like they're excited about that, right? And he admits it. However, like I said, the golem feels like this need to be like, yeah, like nodding the head, yes.
Right.
Like,
yeah, I can definitely.
Sure, he's very into this in classes. When he would give classes and people like nod their head, he's like, "You're all nodding, yes." He's like, "But you don't know what I'm talking about. Why are you guys all nodding?" And people just feel like, "Yep." And like, no, it's you don't. And you sometimes see that you could be sitting in a room full of powerful people. And no one asks a question. And then everyone assumes, oh, they understood. You could ask a question, and if it's a good question, and if it's done properly, you'll see another people ask a question. And they'll be like, I also didn't understand. Once people feel comfortable to do so. Yeah. But everyone feels like if I say I don't know, there's a sense of like, how do you not know all the things? Like, I feel like people in this little corner, like, they'll feel uncomfortable if, like, the assumption sort of is, oh, Plato, Aristotle, Kierkegaard, Foucault, and you're like, why would I know all those scientists? Why is the assumption that we're all of us are Jonathan Peugeot and Jordan Peterson and Sam Harris, like combined, we have all that information? But
Yeah.
people feel the need to be like, yeah, of course, yeah, I saw this thing. I know, I saw like Awakening from the Meaning Crisis. I'm Aristotle. I know all these things. So
Yeah.
and I understand. On the other hand, you don't want to be over here in this little corner for 5 years and be like, "Wow, who's Jordan Peterson?" Right? That would be strange. But nevertheless, people have a hard time saying. Again, the translation here, I didn't hear. And if he didn't hear, that means he doesn't know. But the attitude is saying, I am not aware of this information. I don't know this. And that doesn't make you not wise, right? Because the attitude is wise doesn't mean he knows all stuff in the world.
Right. I mean, wisdom begins with ignorance. I mean, recognizing and admitting your ignorance gives you the chance to rectify it. The Rambam seems to agree with you. He says he does not pretend to know more than he does.
Yeah, so he agrees, no?
Yeah, he agrees. Yeah.
Oh, he agrees. Okay, wait, what else does the book have? One second, I'm just writing this down for myself. Chezi and Rambam the same. Okay, good. Okay.
Honestly, like there's three different things here, and they all say more about the understanding. One here mentions the Bartanura, which is, I guess, is it a person or is it just like another compilation?
It's a compliment. It's like a Pirush.
Yeah, it's a Pirush. Okay, so he says that if it's something that you know that you've gotten from your own reasoning, you don't say, and somebody challenges you on it, you don't say, "Oh, I heard it from my teachers." So that's
you don't say I heard it from your teachers.
Yeah, because if it's something that you got from your own reasoning, you don't say I got it from my teachers. So you don't, right? So if he rules based on his own reasoning, he does not say I heard it from my teachers. That's what.
Oh, okay. So in this translation over here is someone that's not trying to. There would be a fear, right? I have a good theory, even if you like it, then I'll come and say it. But once I say it's mine, you might be like, well, okay, what does Chezi know at the end of the day? Now, I might decide to smuggle it and be like, yeah, one of the sages says that, and that's like my rubber stamp for my idea, so to speak.
Right. And obviously, I mean, this assumes that you're lying, right? Because
I was going to say, it's also Gnevat Dat. It's not only not being wise, it's also being like a jerk.
Yeah.
By the way, I'm just thinking about what I just answered you right now about Bartanura. It's just because I'm thinking about like the Mishnayot Bartanura, and it's like a movement. But there's Rav Ovadia from Bartanura who, he did a whole Pirush on Mishnayot and different things, but I can't remember when. I don't know. I just can't remember. Let's just check.
So maybe that's him.
Okay.
All right. I think they mentioned their source.
Ovadia Bartanura, yeah, okay, 1450, and Bikar Perush Mishnah, exactly. Okay, so but there's other things today called like the Bart, like it comes from him, but Perush Bartanura. So like,
right, that's what I can remember.
That's what I was referring to, but it is a man.
Okay.
And you know where I heard that from? I heard it from the Rambam, so you know it's true.
Yeah.
The Rambam famously says you could use an iPhone. Famously.
Yeah.
He talks about this. Okay. And the last one over here, umodeh la'emet v'chilufohen bagolem. So ultimately he says, and he modeh al ha'emet. So this is really like the final stage, but it's really, it encompasses all the stages like we were saying earlier. Like these are all interconnected, which is a wise man could say, he's committed to the truth, right? That's what a wise man wants. So he doesn't feel embarrassed to say, I don't know. He doesn't feel embarrassed to quote other people or say, I was wrong and you are right. However, the golem, not only can he not say that because of ego games and things like that, he's also not wise yet. So he shouldn't even be making any truth claims, whether he has the truth or whether he was wrong and he didn't know the truth. He isn't in the position to say the word truth yet because he hasn't built up the repertoire of listening, hearing, answering, questioning. Then you could start deciphering between truth and untruth and get to the level of someone to say like, yeah, you know what? I was wrong. But for the golem, how do you know if you're wrong or not? And in a certain sense, it's telling you like, maybe you're even right. Just like slow your roll and watch yourself. And when I say slow in my role, that relates to the last line, which is the reverse in all these cases. Again, like we said earlier in the beginning, it's not really one's wise and one's dumb, or like and we said already, the guy that waits to speak in the right time and the golem decides to interrupt. But it's more about the golem interrupting or answering or being nervous. And we mentioned this earlier about young students or old students. Some of them are like older grapes. Some of them, and we gave examples of how it's like it's good that they're like grapes, or it's bad that they're like grapes.
Yeah.
Either way, there's something about the young person or the eager person, which is like, you're not wise yet, but we shouldn't underestimate the fact that you want to be involved.
Mm-hmm.
So like in this Mishnah, we're not saying wise man good, golem bad. We're saying wise man good, golem, shape yourself to look like the wise man, and channel those energies of like being fearless and interrupting. Still be fearless, don't interrupt. Like, you know, start channeling those stuff. So it's just to emphasize that we're not bashing the unwise. We're just telling them this is the roadmap to be wise.
Right, and that actually connects to the idea of the commentary. Asks, why doesn't it tell us what the golem does? Here it just tells us.
You're reading it. This is from the book?
This is from the book, yeah.
Okay, so the commentary tells us that?
That the reason why it doesn't mention the behavior of the golem and it tells us what the wise person is doing is the same thing with God, with the Torah talking about Noah. It says he's a tzaddik, he's a wise, he's a righteous generation. So he tries to be nice. He tries to speak about good things instead of putting people down. So this Mishnah also takes the same tact of trying to talk about the good person and what those behaviors look like, instead of talking about the unrefined person and what they might not be doing that's optimal.
Just to the three people that are watching right now, when you mentioned Noah over there and he says that he was righteous in his generation, the reason you mentioned that as an example, because our sages teach us that when the Torah says his generation, it was hiding the fact that if he was compared to the generation of Abraham, he wouldn't have been considered righteous, right? Mm-hmm. However, we didn't want to come out and bash him that way. Instead, we framed it in the context that was relevant for him. But that's a good example. Mishnah Chet. Oh yeah, okay. This one. Can you scroll down to the next one for a second as well?
Yep.
These are, I mean, they're long, but they're sort of, at least from what I remember, there's not much happening. And then Chayara Balalam Ashvorcha Vel Chilul. Okay. Let's see how far we got with these right now. Do you want to read number 8?
Yes. שבעה מיני פורעניות באין לעולם, על שבעה גופי עבירה. מקצתן מעשרין ומקצתן אינן מעשרין. רעב של מהומה בא, מקצתן רעבים, מקצתם שבעים. גמרו שלא לעשר, רעב של בצורת בא. ושלא ליטול את החלה, רעב של כליה בא. דבר בא לעולם על מיתות האמורות... דבר בא לעולם על מיתות האמורות בתורה, שלא נמסרו לבית דין, ועל פרות שביעית. חרב באה לעולם על עינוי הדין ועל עיוות הדין, ועל המורים בתורה שלא כהלכה.
Is that it? That's it. Okay.
Yeah.
You want to take it in English or no?
Yeah, I'll take it in English.
Okay.
7 types of retribution come to the world for 7 types of sin. When some tithe and others don't, hunger caused by turmoil ensues. Some are hungry, others have their fill of food. When all are unanimous in their failure to tithe, how do you say that?
Tita.
When all are unanimous in their failure to tith, a hunger by drought ensues, for not separating challah and annihilating hunger results.
And annihilating hunger. Okay, yeah.
Plagues come to the world for those capital crimes mentioned in the Torah that have not been given over to the court, and for desecrating the produce of the sabbatical year. And the sword comes to the world for the procrastination of justice, the corruption of justice, and because of those who misinterpret the Torah.
All right, I think this is pretty clear. It's pretty straightforward. Okay. I'm trying to remember this. To be honest, it could be that your book will come in handy over here.
Yeah.
Because I'm feeling a little less confident specifically with this one, but we'll see. So by the way, first off, we're not discussing any more the behavior of man necessarily, like we were talking about the wise men over here. Now we're dealing with, again, like still 7, and still dealing with like results that happen in creation. Again, we're still in the 7th day right now. We're in the world itself. So we're being told of, so on one, we saw how wise people interact in the world. Now we see how these retributions, these purniyot come. And the list also continues in the next parak about all the 7, but it's like, we have dever, which is like cattle dying, and we have over here battle and hunger, and there's other ones as well. First of all, we could ask off the bat, because we've been going through a few different missionaries already. We've spoken about famously the question that Moses asked God, and what the book of Job comes to examine is tzaddik viralo, shavet tovlo, right? So here we're saying that the 7 bad things come to the world because of these 7 sins that you've done. But we just said that that's not necessarily true, right? Bad things happen to good people, even if they didn't sin.
Yeah.
My only point is to say that this isn't like a closed circuit. This is like a general idea they're telling us. Obviously, God has his own calculations, right? So it doesn't mean like if you did this one thing that this is definitely going to happen. Rather, the Torah is giving us, the mission is giving us like a general understanding of like, what are the general guidelines as far as like these rules. It's just like a little tidbit. Okay, so we're talking about the titith over here, the maaser that we do. We take from fruits, for example, if I bring in like a lemon from the outside, from a lemon tree, and this is also after the lemon tree can't be touched. You can't touch the produce for 3 years, because those years are orlad. They're considered for God, and then or they're not really to be touched. It's just nature's. Then the 4th year you're allowed to have it. There's a thing called hekdesh where it's sanctified. Either way, when I bring it into the house, I cut off a 10th. Okay, the 10th I don't eat. And we put it aside, and there's this is practiced in different avenues. So we're saying over here, so some people are cutting off this little piece and giving it towards God, and some are not. And sometimes it's for God, sometimes it's for the poor, sometimes it's for the Levites, sometimes it's for the high priest. Either way, I'm not doing that. So we're being told over here that that a famine comes, right? And then we give another example over here. Okay, and the result of that famine is some of them are hungry and some of them are satiated, are full. And in general, we're being told over here about if this is the status of the community, right? If your community is in a place where some of you are doing what's good, some of you are not doing what's good, which is, by the way, just the general status of most communities, we're being told the result from that is then everything's going to be hunky-dory. Some people are going to suffer. Some people won't suffer. Just like the amount of commitment you're putting in is the same type of reaction you're going to get.
Yeah,
right?
And the commentary here also kind of emphasizes it's almost like to see the systematic way that God has set this up. We could also see like a natural way where they kind of emphasize the fact that it says the retribution comes to the world, so it's kind of like in a passive way. in a passive, in reaction, like you said, to your actions. So your actions are active in this world, and depending on what you're doing, the punishments might come or might not. So
Right.
it's reflection.
Just to that line, I'll reference again what I said in the beginning, which is like,
Yeah.
that's the system. However, you could be a great guy and still get screwed.
Yes.
Right. So don't be looking at this, be like, but I did 1 + 1 = 2. And now,
Right.
like, it didn't happen. Gamru shelo la'aser, ra'av shel mehuma veshel batzeret ba. So in English, they already give us a translation over here, but when it says gamru, which means when they all unanimous decide together. Right. So here, if earlier we were saying the society is a little protected because we're saying, listen, some people do it, some people don't do it, so you're going to have sort of like a 50-50 split over here. Here we're saying where now people intentionally decided that they don't want to do this, right? So then everyone gets overwhelmed. And you can also see it in the land. There is the Ra'av of Batzeret that we're talking about, right? Like, the land, the produce is not growing. But because everyone decided to do it together, it's as if the land itself gets overwhelmed. What's the translation of English over here of mehuma? Because I knew what mehuma means, like there's a war or there's a lot of death.
So you got turmoil.
No, 1 second. This is when all unanimous in their failure to this, the hunger by drought ensues.
That's batzoret, right?
Right. No, but there's another one though. No.
Right. Yeah. Hunger by like for not separating challah and annihilating hunger results.
Okay, that's where it is. Okay. So, okay, I got you.
Well,
1 second. No, I'm not wrong over here.
You're not?
Oh, no, I skipped it before. I read over here, Ra'av shel mehuma. What is over here? Because there's Ra'av. No, the earlier one is mehuma. Then the second one is batzoret. Okay, and then the other one is kleya. Okay, sorry, my bad. I was getting confused over here in the thing over here. Beseder. So again, if they all decided together not to do it, then we could see that they get they get walloped, and we don't have this differentiation between some do and some don't. Right? They all decided to do it, then they're all going to suffer. And again, this is in a certain sense, we're talking about the status of the community. Right? We're not talking about an individual over here. We're talking about the people. V'shelo litol et hachala ra'av shel kliyaba. Right? The one who doesn't separate the challah, and this is a famous thing that the women do when they cook, when they do hafrashat challah. This is annihilating hunger results. Okay, so this is too, and this is really speaking about all these examples we just gave right now, which is we should be giving, right? This world requires us. Well, we live in a world. I'll take a step back. We live in a world where we are the receivers and God is the giver, right? And we're receiving. And in a sense, there's always a difference between the giver, God, and the receiver, which is us. And in a certain sense, you could feel like I'm doomed, right? I can only receive, I can never give. And if I can never give, then I can't be like others. I can't be like God. I can't ever reach to that. I can't reach that level. And so why even try? So with that logic, we would be saying to ourselves, well, Ben, Chezi, why don't you give? And once you give from what you got, you yourself become a giver. And you could get closer to God, right? So we're saying over here we're giving examples of people that are not giving. Half are giving, they're not giving, they're not putting the portion aside. They're just keeping it from themselves. So they're in this place where they are definitely not moving closer towards God. Now you could say, okay, Chezi, but let's say I am giving. This relates to something earlier that we said as I'm thinking about this. But let's say I am giving, and we said me giving turns me into God. Right? I become one with the giver. Then where am I? I disappeared again right now. Earlier, there was a differentiation between us. Now I'm starting to give, and now I'm turning into God, and now I'm all one with him again. So where's Chezi? Where's Ben? This goes back to what we said earlier about the modani, right? I need to humble myself to recognize there is no me. I'm all part of God. But once I'm all part of God, I recognize he wants a relationship with the little me. And once I could recognize that, I could say Modeh Ani, right? I could thank God. I realize that I'm actually wanted. But the idea is that, again, what the Mishnah is trying to stress over here, that these things are happening to the world because the world, the land itself gets overwhelmed because we are not acting in the proper fashion, which is we are not giving, right?
Right.
We're
It's
not
not reciprocal.
exactly.
Yeah, I mean, to give an incomplete example of but like taxes is a very kind of like obvious example of like you could think that you can give, like you live in a community and you think, okay, I can give to the people around me, or I don't give at all, but you don't really give to the people around you. You don't pay individual people to kind of sustain your community that way. You actually give to a higher entity, whether it's the city or whether it's the national government, to then distribute it fully, right? So this is almost like a natural process that happens also in the world, where and this is kind of like the one way to think, I think, to think about the not using the land, for like on the seventh year, of like being able to view your relationship with the world, with nature, as a part of God in a way that is reciprocal and is not over consuming. So you're giving to a higher entity in order that it kind of like replenishes everything. And I think what it shows here, that this is, in a Pageauian sense, it's a fractal,
Yeah.
like a fractal pattern.
Now you could ask here, well, if you're talking about that, why are we not just giving the example of charity? Like why? Like if we're giving, that's like the classic example, right? Charity, give. Well, how are we using the example of like the challah, the tidif? So
well, that's what I was trying to refer to. I'm not clear on this, but like, yeah, why wouldn't I give just to all the people that are like, there's a need to give to a higher entity than like directly to all the people. I guess it's because it's impossible, but I don't know. What are you thinking? I'm curious.
So one is, first of all, there's a concept in halakha called aniyei ircha kodmim, right? So if you're deciding to give charity, first focus at home, right? Clean your room. Jordan Peterson. Before you're talking about saving the whole world, Greta Thunberg, are there sick or unhealthy or homeless people in your neighborhood? So before you start fixing the whole world, how about you focus there? However, when we're talking about, and that's on the individual, when we're talking about, like in this mission, about the society, the community, right? Which is like, that's why we give the example, Gamru, right? They all decided together unanimously not to do that. Yeah. So the fixing that, repenting in that way, we're using the example of the titit, because that is done in the temple. That is a ritual, right? Which the person that stands at its head is the priest who represents God. So in a certain sense, using this is an example of how we could, because charity is too general. We wanted to make it, we want to focus it on that this is a focus directly towards God. He is giving us and we want to return back. Right. And yes, you could say I could return back to the community, but like you mentioned earlier, you want to find that higher point.
Right. From a very utilitarian, again, I mean, you mentioned God specifically. I'm just embellishing it with the utilitarian, or think about in a system thinking way. This is about scale. Like you're way more efficient, and you can enable scaling the system if you find the higher entities so that it can distribute things more efficiently. Obviously, I mean, I'm just embellishing here, but yeah.
No, I'm saying, but that is the concept also of Maaser Ani.
Yeah.
Right. Like it's something that's built into the system to give to the poor X many years, because we want, like, it's in that sense, it's more centralized. It's also more sanctified because it's oriented towards God, and then it makes its way back to the people. Right. All right. Dever bal haolam al mitot hamurot b'Torah shelo nimseru kadin. Here it says like plagues. Dever, though, is like the death of, like, diseases of cattle. Come to the world for those capital crimes mentioned in the Torah that have not been given over the court, and for desecrating the produce of the sabbatical year. So here it's sort of like another level of rot. Like the food, like it's not only that the dever or the famine comes to the land, now it's in the food itself, right? So the food itself is poisonous. And the reason that we're giving this example is because we're talking about now the court systems. It's not only the individuals are not giving, the court systems themselves are not managing to create justice, right? We're seeing over here, and this is a bigger nation. This is like really, if before we're talking about the neighborhood of the community, this is like the nation's problem in a certain sense, right? Once you get to this level where these rulings didn't come out to play, and it's not because like, oh, they were being super nice or they were trying to like be understanding. Rather, we're being told over here that just like in the Tittith, there is like there's like a pushback. There's like fighting against the system in a certain sense, and that's why the retribution of this is more severe, right? We have this plagues inside in the land itself.
Yeah, and it's also it's pushback, and in addition, the commentary mentions that it might also be just in inaction in a way, right? Because it says there are instances where the court cannot enforce the death penalty, such when the perpetrator was not warned, right? You don't care about somebody doing something bad. You don't warn them before they do something, which is a prerequisite to being able to impose the death penalty on them. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Inaction.
And also that prior to, or when the person just flees the scene or flees the court, right? Yeah. And again, that kind of talks about like how the society, you know, is kind of like this society that it has inaction and it doesn't care. Maybe it assists certain criminals without caring about justice, without caring
like,
about
like Chicago during the mafia times, right?
Right.
Like,
that's kind of what it sounds like here.
Yeah. It even says over here, Al Capone.
Al Capone,
yeah.
I would get Capone, yeah.
Right. The Perot Shvi'it, the sabbatical, the fruit of the produce of the sabbatical year. So those things require bi'ur. They require to be, they must be destroyed basically if they're not used. Mm-hmm. And here again, you're seeing like if you don't do it, they're using this example because this is something holy that needs to be, once the time is passed, it needs to be removed. But you're like, okay, whatever, I'm not doing it this week.
Yeah.
That has a ripple effect all the way into your court system, right? Which is like, we should have stopped Guy, but we're like, this inaction. So here too, we see an inaction with these sabbatical years. There's an interpretation where we're talking about like, I believe, and you could corroborate if that's true, about basically them them still doing business with the produce of the sabbatical year, right? Which as in that produce is supposed to be holy. And instead they're using it to still do their business. And again, it's not inaction, but it's sort of like indifference.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. To mention something that I don't remember how I heard about this. Maybe it was an Haftorah recently. But when Joshua, when they conquer Yericho, there is a Joshua, and you correct me if I'm wrong because I don't remember this story too much, but he says he bans taking the spoils from Jericho.
But then Achan
takes it. But there's something about God maybe mentioning how all of Israel is guilty for this. And there's a commentary
because they allowed it to happen within their midst. Right,
because why would Achan need clothing? Why would he need clothing, gold and silver? Because he knows he could trade it because people won't care that he's actually using the spoils. So this is again the indifference and how they're all guilty being complicit in this, as opposed to just Achan who stole the things.
That's a spooky. I remember, if I recall correctly, the ark levitates through the camp and like locates like GPS sort of like on his tent.
Really?
So no, it's not me. It's a mistake. Upgrade this model. And then like right, he hid it underneath his tent, like he dug down up there. Joshua's great. Okay, it's funny. Last week and this week we only managed to get like through like two, but not for a lack of working through it. Just They're longer. חרב באה לעולם על עינוי הדין ועל עיוות הדין ועל המורים בתורה שלא כהלכה. The sword comes to the world for the procrastination of justice, the corruption of justice, and because of those who misinterpret the Torah. So this is obviously all in the background of Chachamim Hizaru b'divrachem, and don't lie and don't cheat, and like we're seeing this like boiled down in a certain sense. So first of all, why are we using the idea of a sword? As we spoke before, a sword, like the left hand, this is discernment, this is cutting, this is a decision has to be made, right? Mm-hmm. And here we're seeing the decision wasn't made about dragging out the case, and it wasn't made about rewarding the wrong party, and it wasn't made about saying that wrong things are right and right things are wrong, right? That's that's usually the example they give of Moresh Balacha. So here too, when they needed to use the sword, right? When they needed to say, we're not dragging this out, he's guilty. Or we needed to pay more attention when we laid down the sword about who was guilty or what we were saying. But because we weren't doing that, we then suffer the consequence of the sword, the swift death.
Mm-hmm. There's interesting kind of specific things that, like, the Rambam talks about how
hit me
a judge who delays the judgment because he wants to torture one of the litigants.
So right. So dragging out the case would be inui hadin, and it's also in the word la'anot is to torture. So you're torturing the truth, basically.
Right. It's interesting. I haven't thought about it. It's like, why would a judge even want to? And I guess if it's you're trying to torture somebody, kind of more so than already their judgment is going to be. Mm-hmm. So it's interesting, and obviously dragging the defendant and not giving them some kind of resolution, that's another of Inui Adin.
Most definitely. Wait, so that's the Rambam. What else? What other gold nuggets you got there?
It says, in a broader sense, agony of the law, which is how they translate
Ivut Adin.
Ivut Adin.
Okay. Which I would translate as like rewarding the wrong party.
Yeah. So this refers to a society that lacks judges who can adjudicate on behalf of the victims of crimes, or a judge who refuses to adjudicate for fear of one of the disputants. This is Bneyot Brahma. I don't know.
You mean like the case in Hague, where they're clearly terrified to speak justice?
I mean, this for that entire organization, yeah.
Yeah, I'm so happy that UNRWA is getting theirs right now, but like it's a little ridiculous that like the world is now doing it, and they needed to see like someone with an UNRWA shirt saying I work for UNRWA killing someone, and only then they're like, oh, I guess they're problematic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
crazy little world. So what do you say? We'll stop here.
I think so. Yeah.
So we'll continue with 9 next week. What's 9? By the way, so Chaya Ra'ah and Galut, that's also part of the 7 that we said earlier about the retributions. So these are them as well. Okay. One second. Can you scroll down a little as I'm looking at this? I'll be interested. I guess I'll ruminate about this more. But right now, taking tips from the wise man, I'm trying to remember what was the first portion over here. I remember, like I remember translations for this and like explanations for this. But this thing about the Shvi'it and the Asirit, I know what it's talking about. I don't know. I'm trying to think of like what tough. Okay, some homework. I'll look into that. I'll look into that. Okay. Number 9. So that's what we'll continue next week.
Yeah.
All of you that were watching, I hope you guys enjoyed. I hope you have a productive week. I hope you learn not to be the golem, but be the wise man. And as we see over here, what comes around goes around. So pay attention.
Thank you, everybody.
Catch you later.